And for David, he felt like this was his last-ditch effort to prove once and for all that this eviction was wrong. A few hours later, 2 police officers, along with David's very worried parents, stood outside of David's apartment. Earlier that afternoon, David's parents had tried to get in touch with David, and they had called him repeatedly, but he hadn't answered. And so at some point, they had driven over to his apartment, and they had pounded on the door and tried to get his attention, but he hadn't come to the door. However, they had heard this strange sound coming from inside the apartment, and it was unsettling enough, and considering the whole circumstance of not being able to get in touch with their son, that they decided to call the police. And so when they got there, the police, they're knocking on the door, yelling out for David, but still no answer. And the police too, they can clearly hear this strange sound, which almost sounded like a mechanical whirring sound or something. They couldn't quite place it, but there definitely was something odd happening in this apartment. And so given the fact that, there's real concern around what's going on with David, the police decide to kick in the door and see what's going on. And so they get out of the way, and one of the officers steps back, kicks the door down, and as soon as the door flies open, that loud mechanical whirring sound becomes way louder. It's so loud, and they suddenly get a complete view into the apartment, and all of them just froze and gasped. So the trap that David had built had functioned exactly as he intended it to. Basically, the authorities were going to come in the front door and be horrified by what they saw, because this trap really was not for them as much as it was for David. He was sort of putting himself into a trap as a display of his protest that you can't pull me out of here. And now authorities have arrived and they've seen the results of this trap. What the trap was a power tool that was the mechanical whirring sound they heard, and it had been tied by David to one of the legs of his billiard table, like an arm jutting off the side of this billiard table. And then the tool had this electric timer that he had rigged to it so that when it went off, it would start the tool. And what was this tool? It was a chainsaw. And what did David do? He intentionally positioned his neck right up against the teeth of this chainsaw, set the timer, and then waited. And he basically timed it so that shortly after getting in position, the timer would go off, it would cut his head off, and then presumably authorities would look inside the apartment and see what, in David's mind, they were responsible for: his death. And sure enough, when the police and the parents looked in, they saw the trap, they heard the saw buzzing, and they saw David's severed head on the ground. Despite David's final protest really having a lot of the effect that he was hoping for, it did make headlines all over the UK. A lot of people heard about this and they were horrified by it. Despite all that, shortly after his death, the apartment complex was demolished.